everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, you're welcome, and if you're a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for tuning in again. This is the part 2 of the V-neckline corset in which I drafted in my last video, and here I have cut out my pieces. For the front, I'm using this net. I'm using like a 3 shades of net. I'm doing this so as to achieve my skin color type and also so as to cover my body. It won't be transparent. Okay, so here I have like 8 layers of net, and for the back I have cut out this crepe fabric. I've cut like about 4 pieces for both sides. I'll be using it for the main bodies and also for the lining, so I have cut out about 4 pieces of it. I've also gone ahead to notch the sides so that I can identify it while I'm sewing. I have also cut out this rope for wrapping my boning. For this corset, I'll be wrapping my boning. If you don't know how to wrap it, make sure that you watch the end of the video. I will show you how to wrap a boning, and I've cut this out. Is about 1.5 inches straight down. Okay, so let's get started. Now for my corset, like I mentioned, I'm using about 8 layers of net, and for the first 6, okay, I'll just use my hemming gum to iron it together just like this, because I don't want the net to be moving while sewing. But I'm using an original net for it, so that's for 4 pieces. I'm using an original net, and it actually doesn't move like that on machine. It sticks than when you are using a tool net. A tool net moves easily on the machine. So, but just to just to secure it, I'm just going to use an hemming gum. Now if you use an hemming gum, it can be obvious for your net. Okay, so don't use as much as I use, and optionally you can choose not to use it. Okay, just use your pin to pin it around just to secure it. So afterwards, I'm going to go ahead to draw out my boning channels, how I want my bones to be on the corset. Okay, so I have drawn the first one, and it looks a little bit messy, but pay attention to this one that I'm making now, and you'll be able to get what I'm doing. So I'm using I have drafted 2 away. Apart from the center one, I've drawn 2 lines, and that's what I'm trying to do on the second side. So I'm measuring the 2 sides to compare what I have on the on the other side, so that it's going to be the same thing. I recommend that you do the same thing. Draft one part, and then you measure what you have on the one part to the second part. Okay, that way you have an equal and perfect boning channel. So when that's done, I'm going to go ahead now to wrap my bone. So this is how I just place the bone like this here, and then I'll cover it this way. Okay, about 1/2 inches or less than 1/2 inches, I mean. So you just sew on it this way on the side. Okay, watch your presser when sewing this. Make sure that it's on the edges at the tip of the boning itself. Okay, so you just go ahead and do it like this. So afterwards, now for the other side, you see I'll just fold in my material inside under the boning, okay, and pass it on top. Hope you can see what I did there. I'm just going to put it under and then pass it, turn it to the other side. Okay, so that way I'll be able to put in the rough edges into the boning. Now inside the boning, it's not going to be showing outside, so just go ahead and sew it like that. That way it looks much neater that way. Okay, so this is one of the ways of wrapping bonings. There are other ways of wrapping, but this one works fine for me, especially for a transparent corset. I don't want the rough edges out. I want it to be completely covered and also neat. This works best for me. Okay, so here's the outcome. You can see that it's looking so neat. So you can put it even on only a corset mesh and it will look very neat. So next, for our V-shaped neckline, like I said when I was cutting, we are going to draft it while sewing. Okay, so I just measured where the V shape is going to be. That's like about 3 inches. Now I measured 3 inches downward. Okay, and then I'm going to now place my boning channels, my boning to meet in that way, so it's going to be like V. Okay, So I will sew down my boning this way down to where I marked, okay, and then I'll stop there and then cut out the boning. And make sure that you watch your presser while doing it. Yeah, I'm going to stitch where you stitched while folding your boning channels, okay, to make your work much more neater. So I'm going to do that also to the other side and make sure that it meets at that place, forming that V shape. So you just watch your presser and then sew it gently like that. You don't need to rush while doing it, just take your time and do it. So afterwards we have our V, and I'm going to place my boning channels on it like this, okay, you can see. So I'm going to sew it down, straight down to the end, and that is it for that part. I'll sew the other side too, okay. I don't know if it's just me, but I had issues sewing these corsets, or I do have issues sewing corsets or hard stuffs with my machine. My thread just keeps on cutting and cutting, and you know that can be frustrating. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other boning lines that I've drafted, okay. So I'll sew my boning channels to the line which I've drafted on my outfits. So you see that I have about 5 channels there, okay, 2 at both sides. So when that is done, okay, to make your corset straight and flat, okay, go ahead and give it a good press. So yeah, I have pressed it and this is what it looks like. So after I have ironed it, I'm not going to go next to put it on the second layer, okay. So this one has 2 layers of net, and that's what I'm going to be using to turn my V-shaped neckline, okay. So make sure that you set aside 2 layers or 3 layers to do the turning, okay, just like the same way you turn your rough neckline inside. That's the same thing that we are doing here. So you set aside 2 layers here and then use it to turn the neck. So I'll just go ahead to sew it down like this, okay. I'll sew it in the V shape. Make sure that your V is sharp and very close to the boning that you sew. So you can see what I have here, okay. So next I'll go ahead to cut it this way, cut it very close to the stitches, and then I will turn it. Yeah, I'm using a normal tourniquet, so it's easy and flexible. And then I'll just go ahead now to, you can also use a skein net, don't get me wrong. So I'll just go ahead to pin it down like this to secure it down. So make sure that you're securing it firmly and take your time to arrange every piece of it, okay. Make sure that you are securing it well. If you don't take your time to do this, you might end up having like some rough edges at the end of the day. So next I've cut out my cup and I've also notched at the important areas like I mentioned. This is going to help us to identify where to join, okay. Afterwards I've also added my interfacing to it. I added wording for the back, and then that's for the lining, and then for the inside I just added the soft interfacing. So you can do anyone, use a cotton stay, anyone that you have available, use it for your interfacing, okay. But and also it's also optional for you to use a wording. Now for this bust or for this cup, I'll be using the bust caging method. So I'll be using boning, I'll be sewing boning on each of the cup I'm not going to be using a cup for this. Okay, we'll be using the bust caging. Now if you don't know how to do bust caging, this is an opportunity for you to know how to cage your cup. So you can see that I put the 2 points together. Okay, so it's important that you notch. It's going to help you to identify which area, and then it's going to make your work fast. So I'll just go ahead and join every piece. For the lining, which is my wadding, I'll just go ahead to draft where I want to sew my boning. Okay, so I'll sew first round this way. Okay, and also I'll be sewing the boning on top also, and then on both sides. So make sure that you get to your center and it should land on your breast point exactly. You know that breast point, your nipple point. Okay, make sure that your boning passes through that point down to the other side. It's very important. That way you are able to cage your cup properly. So look at how I'm drafting it. Okay, I know it's a little bit rough, but just bear with me. So that is the pattern in which I'm going to use to sew my boning. Now before I go ahead with that, let me sew the back. Okay, so you can see here I've notched the 2 sides. So let's go ahead to sew the back. And here I'm going to be using this method that I don't know, maybe it's not common, but I prefer to use this method for corsets. It makes your work easy and fast. I'm going to turn the side. So this is the center back. Okay, I'll turn it this way. So after sewing it down, remember I'm sewing by 1/2 inch because that's the sewing allowance that I left. Okay, so after I've done that, I've turned the side, and that's where our eaglet is going to be. That's also the opening for the center back. So I'll put the 2 sides, that's the back sides, the side back. Okay, I'll put the notches and make sure that the notches are together. Okay, before sewing. So I'm going to secure that with my pin, and then I will sew it down like that by 1/2 inch. I know someone might be thinking that, oh, how am I going to sew my boning? So this is it. I'm going to be using a plastic boning for the back. I know I used a sewable boning for the front, but for the back I'm using a plastic boning. So here I'm just going to sew where my boning is going to enter. Okay, that's like less than 1/2 inch. I'm going to sew it. This is for the center back. Okay, so I'll pass in 2 bonings there, and there I'm just sewing down so that to create the channels where my bone is going to enter, and then I'll leave a space for my eaglet. Okay, like 1/2 inch or more than 1/2 inch, so that I can fix my eaglet there. Okay, so in between the eaglet I'll be passing boning channels to it, and then next also on my sides, on the center where my dart, I'm also going to pass a boning to it. So I just created the channel. Now you can choose to pass boning on both sides, on the left and the right. It makes it to be much more firmer, but for this illustration I'm only going to create 1 boning channel in that part. You can choose to create more boning channels. All you have to do is just to sew on both sides. Now I want you also to note that I'm still going to create a boning channels for the side. It's important that you add boning at the sides. That's where you are joining the front and the back together. Now let's go straight to our cup caging. Now when doing the cup caging, take your time to do it. Okay, while sewing, watch your presser while doing this, and then sew at the edge. When sewing also, you can see that I'm leaving 1/2 inches sewing allowance. Okay, how I'm going to join, when I'm going to join it to the main bodies of the corset. So take note of that while sewing your boning. So while caging your cup, make sure you sew the down part first. It's very, very important. Okay, So I'm just going to go ahead and sew the other side like this. Please, while sewing, make sure that you take your time and sew. So this is what we have, and I'm going to turn my cup upside down like this and then give it a good press. Okay, so yeah, I've ironed my cup and this is what it looks like. And next I'm going to flesh it up. To flesh it up, I'm using this fiber and I'll cut about 2 pieces. I was thinking of 2 pieces, but later I ended up cutting it one after the other, and I discovered that at the press point I'll be needing more there. I don't want more at the sides. Okay, some people can do like 3 layers and then trim it off. I didn't want to waste my fiber, so I just added layers upon layers, and I used hemming gum to gum each layers together. Okay, you can as well choose to do 2 layers and just sew it. If you don't want to use hemming gum, just sew it down like that with your sewing machine. Okay, it will still work depending on the size and the shape of your cup. So after fleshing it, you can also use your hair stay to iron it down to just give it a very good finishing, but I'm not doing that in this cup, okay, in this video. But for the best results, I recommend that you do that. After fleshing it, I've gone ahead to turn my lining. Remember, where I fleshed is actually the lining, and the main fabric is the one that with an hair stay. Okay, so I've gone ahead to turn the 2 sides together. Now when you turn it like this is what it's going to look like. And also make sure that you iron the 1/2 inches that you're going to sew around the cup together. Make sure that you're going to iron the 1/2 inches which you're going to use to sew under the cup. Make sure that you iron it, you press it well if you can do that, or you can use other methods to do it. Okay, it's best, it makes your work faster and then neater. Now to attach my cup to the main bodies, I'm going to just make sure I get the edges together just like this. You can see what I'm doing. Okay, I make sure that it aligns together with the tip of my cup, so everything falls in place. And when sewing a corset with this deep neck plunge line or even any other corset, I recommend that you first of all secure your lining like this. Okay, this is one of the way you can sew your corset neat, especially for a transparent corset or when you're using a mesh like this. We are going to secure the under. Look at what I'm doing. First of all, use your pin to secure it like this for the under, and then you sew it. After using your pin to secure, go ahead to sew it. Okay, this gives your corset at the front and at the back a very good finishing. So when you have sewed the lining part to your bodies, you can now go ahead to sew the main cup fabric to the bodies. This makes your corset looks more professional. Now make sure that you're holding everything. You can see that I'm dragging it in such a way that the edges, the 2 edges, that's the bodies and the cup, aligns together. Okay, so that it's going to be smooth. Now for the sake of this video, I'm not going to be sewing my cup down. I'll just use my pin to show you, and then in my next video I would sew it down and then fix the eaglet. That's going to be the part 3 of this video. I had to just cut this out because the video is actually long. Okay, so on the part 3 you would have seen the sewing part and then the eaglet and also the corset, the zipper and the yoke. Okay, we'll talk about that in my next video. Now for this V shape, take your time also to fix your corset cup together like this. Make sure that it's aligning. Put the V or where the boning is inside the cup like this, and make sure that it aligns. Like I said earlier, use your pin to first of all secure its place before sewing it down. So next for my back, I'm going to go ahead to pipe the down part like this. Okay, so you can pipe and add boning if you want to. Some do that, but I have not tried that. Okay, since I used the plastic bone for the back, I don't think there's any need for me to pipe and then insert a bone into it. So you can just pipe like this. Okay, it will still come out nice and neat. Sorry, I was using paper to sew. My machine wasn't sewing properly, so I had to just include paper to it. Now, so this is what the back looks like. I'm just going to go ahead next to join the front bodies and the back bodies of the corset together. So for the sides, I'm sewing by 1 inches because that's the sewing allowance that I left. So whatever sewing allowance that you leave, maybe ½ inches, 1.5, make sure that you take exactly that so that it will come out well. So I'm using a paper to make it add airway. So after joining the sides together, remember I said I'm also going to pass a boning to the side of my corset. It is highly optional, but I recommend that you do that. So because of that, I'm going to cut the parts. I'm going to cut out the sides like this so as I can be able to pass my boning channels. Now I'm also using the sewable boning for this. Okay, it's okay when you use, it's best to use sewable boning than the plastic boning. So I'm going to put my wrapped boning on it like this and then sew it. Make sure that you cut the excesses out before doing this. For the down part, we are also going to pipe it, okay, so as to give it the best, a very neat finishing. For this sewable boning, I didn't wrap the whole boning. I only wrapped one side to give me allowance, or to give it allowance while I'll be sewing the sides, okay. Because the boning is not going to sit perfectly fine on it, that's why I just sewed one side and then on the fabric I sewed the other side. So that is what we have. You can see that it's looking very, very neat and the finishing is really, really great. So if you want a very good finishing, okay, giving you the finishing of Vicky James corsets, I recommend that you do this exactly. All right, so this is how far we can go for this video. The remaining parts will be in part 3 by God's grace next week. Before next week, I'll be posting the third part. So thank you for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.